Hello, my name is John Rose, and in the rest of this video I'd like to take a closer look at Howard Beale's speech, and I'd like to put things in perspective for you guys. And in order to put his speech into perspective, you have to understand a little bit about my perspective and my approach. I've said over and over in all of my videos, there's only one thing we have to do to put an end to this madness, and that is satisfy two groups of needs. Remember, the first group of needs has to do with going upstream and correcting mistakes and finding the knowledge we're missing and applying it. So how do we correct the mistakes? We find the knowledge, we apply it, and that's when we get reconnected. That's when we correct the fall of mankind. That's the ultimate solution. So when we go upstream, when we satisfy the first group of needs, there are 12 essential needs. One of them is natural food. We're not doing that. We're eating unnatural food. So that's the big mistake we got to correct in the second stage of knowledge, on the wrong path. And we do it mainly because of false knowledge. That's part of our traditions. So we got to find that part of information in our traditions that makes us think we can make mistakes and not suffer the consequences. And then once we find that knowledge, we got to apply it and stop making the mistakes. So in order to understand Mr. Beale's speech, you have to understand that he didn't have any solutions. He knows I'm mad, I'm pissed off as hell. Well, we don't know what to do. No one knows what to do. That's why we're also pissed off. Well, they don't know they got to go upstream. That's the problem that they have. That's the piece of the puzzle almost everyone has. They don't know that we got to go upstream to solve our problems. Remember, there are 3 stages of knowledge, and it isn't complicated. First stage is where knowledge is acquired. So divide 1/3 of your screen here. In the middle, that's the second stage of knowledge, where knowledge is applied. And then the third stage of knowledge is where knowledge is manifested. So we have thoughts, actions, reactions, beliefs, causes, effects, belief system, lifestyle choices, feedback system, the things we think here in the first stage of knowledge, the things we do or have done to us in the second stage of knowledge, and the things we get in the third stage of knowledge. So if we don't like what we got in the third stage of knowledge, we have to determine, is it within our control or is it outside our control? The problem is we don't know the difference. We lack that wisdom. So most of us are doing things that we think are okay, and they're not okay. So this is the knowledge we need to find to solve all of this madness, is find the knowledge we're missing. And again, the biggest problem is we're eating the wrong food. The first mistake, the fall of mankind, destroyed a nutrient that feeds one of our senses. Now we lost one of our senses. That's why we have a crazy world. So why are things so bad? Everyone knows things are bad. Why? Because we got crazy people in charge. And they're the worst of us. But they're a reflection of us. And if we don't like the way things are, it's a bottom-up solution. We can't expect any system to solve our problems. We can't expect any government to solve our problems. As long as we are a sick society, there are no governments that can solve our problems unless we have a philosopher king situation. And that's really what we're at. You guys are too sick to control yourselves. If you can't even control yourself, how can you get a bunch of people to control the rest of us? We can't. It doesn't work. It's only going to end up as a means to control us. And that's what's happening now with the government. So that's part of what happens with this other group of needs. Remember, 2 groups of needs we have to satisfy. 12 essential needs, but then we have 2 additional temporary needs. They're always going to change as conditions change. But one of them has to do with subsequent causes that aren't going to go away just because we remove the primary causes. And that's on an individual level. So we've damaged our anatomy. But guess what? We've also damaged society, and we damaged the environment. So the part about society being damaged is the big part that this speech is really all focusing on. You know, look at these politicians. Why are they doing this? You know, why is there a depression? Think about this. How can there be a depression on an abundant planet? That's because the sick people who rule over us want to keep us so enslaved that we got to focus more on getting that loaf of bread than we do focusing on them as what we have to, put our attention to and do something about. And that in itself can be a distraction, because the only way to get rid of that aspect of us is for all of us to change. So there's a lot of work we got to do downstream, and if you're not angry, you're very naive, or you're just you're you're just exhausted, mentally exhausted, and I understand that. This can wear on a person after a while. But once you understand the sick world we live in, once you understand the amount of suffering that's going on right now, if you don't get outraged, you're brain dead. You are not aware of what's going on. I'm telling you, folks, we got to get motivated. Anger is a way to motivate some of us. We got to use whatever it takes for whatever person that helps motivate. If getting angry is what motivates you, then do so. But remember, we're talking about different types of anger here. This is righteous indignation. You're supposed to get pissed off when you know they're pouring battery acid in the child for chemo. I've gone through such an array of emotions this morning. I love the Howard Beale speech. I can listen to it dozens of times over and over, and I usually do. And the whole time I'm ecstatic. Tears are pulling out of my eyes. I'm laughing. I'm elated, thinking, yes, this can be done. This can be done. And then I thought about, well, let's see, how can I follow up this video, this introduction? And I initially thought of following that up with a bunch of YouTube videos of children being given chemo. So I watched about a half a dozen of those, and I was bawling like a child, man. Don't you guys understand what they're doing? I'm all teared out, man. I am totally teared out. Oh, that's all I did all morning long. I was bawling with laughter and enjoyment, listening to Howard Beale motivating people, and then watching these children being given chemo and going to the hospital. And oh God, what are we doing? When are we going to put an end to this? If that doesn't piss you off, what is wrong with you? If you're not outraged, you're totally naive, or you shut off your frontal lobe. You don't want to give it any thought. And it's understandable. Like the people in that movie, Network, they were helpless. They felt helpless. So yeah, if that's the situation, if there's nothing we can do about it, that makes sense. So it goes back to the serenity prayer, which comes from Epictetus. God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. That comes from Epictetus. There are three types of problems. One where we have 100% control, our lifestyle choices, what we do. Then we have limited control over acts of war, crime, and violence. And then we have no control over accidents and acts of nature. So we have to be aware of what kind of problem we're dealing with. You can't cry over a tornado. Nothing you could have done about it, except maybe built a shelter for it to protect yourself. But, accidents are going to happen. Acts of nature is going to happen. And, yeah, we got to accept those things. But everything else, we have control and limited control. So, the good news about my channel is I'm offering a solution for the vast majority of our problems. The vast majority of our problems are 100% within our control, but we lack the wisdom to know the difference. That's our problem. We've been duped, we've been tricked by the sickest of us who are exploiting the sickness in man. We are sick. Look at us. We're pathetic. Why can't we wake up from this? There are a lot of reasons. I've identified at least 55 of them, but I also know it's overwhelming when you look at any one of them, actually. But when you realize there's only one thing we have to do, and that's test an idea as time has come, you realize, hey, we don't need to get mad. We just got to test an idea whose time has come. Now, that's going upstream, of course, but when we go downstream, I always get confused when I've got to reverse this image with you. Got to go upstream to get reconnected, to satisfy our needs, to eat natural foods. But we got to go downstream to work with all that damage we've done to society. Number one priority is take back control over the money supply. Why do we have depression? Why is there depression when we live on an abundant planet? Well, go back into 1913 here in America. We had corrupt politicians that sold their soul, made a deal with counterfeiters, gave them a 20-year contract, which we renewed over 5 times. They're still in existence here. And we gave a deal to these counterfeiters and said, look, we know we can print our own money, make our own money. That's what we have power to do, but we're going to give that job over to you. And what do? They print the money out of thin air for the price of paper and ink. Then they charge us the principal plus interest. There's not enough money in print that's been in circulation that's been printed that can even pay back the interest, so we're debt slaves. That's what John Adams meant when he said there are two ways to conquer a nation. One is by the sword and the other is by debt. We are debt slaves. So in 1913, the Federal Reserve Act was passed. Now, that dollar is worth less than a nickel. It's worth less than 4 cents, and that's by design. They want to keep us poor. We're debt slaves. There's not enough money in circulation. Don't think the money issue is too complicated for you to understand. All you got to do is be against it. Realize what happened in 1913 and what's pursued since then. What else happened in 1913? The Federal Income Tax Amendment was supposedly ratified, supposedly. And when we pay our income taxes here in America, guess where all that money goes to? To pay the interest on the debt to these counterfeiters that are printing our money for us. So if it takes you 4 months out of the year, if you're paying 25% income tax, that means 4 months out of the year you're a slave for someone else. The small group of people who tricked our government, who bribed our politicians to pass this act to give them power to print our money. What happened in 1913? The FBI was established. And what else happened in 1913? Well, before I tell you that, there's a lot of talk right now about auditing the Fed. And I love what Eustace Mullins said not too long ago, saying, we don't want to audit the Fed. That would give them substantiability. We don't want to do that. You don't audit the mafia. You don't audit an illegal operation. You don't audit a criminal syndicate. You simply put them out of business. That's what we need to do with the Fed. Now, Eustace Mullins is an interesting man. I keep saying I'm going to do a video on nothing but him. He's considered the grandfather to the Federal Reserve movement. He's the guy who did all the research to this. He used to be on the staff of the Library of Congress. And he's the only person on the staff who's ever been fired for political reasons by, guess who? A senator at the time who was the president of the Anti-Defamation League. Now let's go back to 1913. Federal Reserve Act, Income Tax Amendment, FBI, Anti-Defamation League was formed. Voltaire said, to learn who rules over you, find out who you're not allowed to criticize. You can't even question the Holocaust in 14 countries in Europe? What is that all about? Now, you got to keep in mind, the people who rule the world are Satanists. And they decided to disguise themselves, hide themselves within the Jewish religion and sort of take it over. So that we can then have a scapegoat. It's the Jews, it's the Jews, it's the Jews. So how many people do you hear say, the Jews, look at them, look at them, look at them. No, they're Satanists, they're Zionists. They took over that religion because they got to keep us distracted. There's layers upon this, and I don't even care how many layers there are, and I don't know. It doesn't matter. We just got to correct what they've done. But then what they do is then they get the Christians and the Muslims to fight against one another. So that's what they've done. It's all about divide and conquer. When you study the MO of psychopaths, who the rulers of the world are, they are psychopaths. You couldn't do what they're doing unless you were a psychopath. And they consider themselves superior because they can step on us like an ant, and they don't have any remorse for it. And they therefore think they're superior. We don't care if we slaughter you, we get you guys to fight wars with one another. They finance both sides. It's all about divide and conquer. Remember that great speech by Martin Luther King within 24 hours when he was to be murdered? He knew it. And he gave that speech and he said, look, man, I know they're coming for me. I'm not going to be around much longer. And when I'm gone, they're going to use an old favorite formula of the pharaohs. And the pharaoh a long time ago knew what to do because it's the same people. It's these Satanists. And they're going to use an old favorite form of the pharaoh. And that is to get you guys to fight amongst yourselves. You see, that's what it's all about. Man, woman, Christian, Muslim, black, white. It's all a distraction. We're always being distracted. We got so much more in common. It's ridiculous to look at something as different as a religion or a belief system or a color. We are all one, and we don't sense that and feel it because of the very first mistake we made. That's why you have to realize how important it is to get reconnected and go upstream. So, what do we see everywhere? Downstream solutions, downstream solutions. Whoops, going the wrong way again. Downstream solutions, downstream solutions. Got to go upstream, my friends. Got to get reconnected. Got to get at the root of the problem. The first cause, if you don't understand the first cause, you can't figure anything out. A lot of you don't have the capacity to do that or even the willingness to do it. I understand. But I have both, and I've done it. I worked real hard to go back to the first cause. And there is no other cause. Some people say, oh, it wasn't cooking our food, it was eating the animals. I agree, eating the animal made it worse. But we couldn't have eaten those animals if we hadn't mastered fire, because that's how we hunted them initially. We set the forest on fire, they'd all run off the cliff, and we'd have a feast. Did it screw up our behavior? Yeah, it really did. But so did cooking, because the cooking in itself destroyed the biophoton. Now we lost one of our senses. That's why we started eating animals. We didn't have any sense. Don't you see? Why would we ever eat an animal? And that's what people are going to say. That's the real fall of mankind. No, the real fall of mankind is cooking our food. Why we cooked our food, who knows? We can speculate, but it doesn't matter. All we have to realize is we got to correct that mistake. Number one, correct the mistake. Go upstream, find the knowledge we're missing. Testing ideas, time has come. Go down to the description box below and watch my seminar. It's a free seminar. I don't sell anything. I just want you guys to get reconnected. Because I know I'm connected to you guys. I want you to be better so I can make my life better. It's a simple concept. Simple concept. Once you feel connected. But most of us don't feel that, so we don't really grasp it at all. And it's not that hard to do, actually, intellectually. I figured that out long before I understood about getting reconnected. It was just a no-brainer to me. But I realize we're all different, and we all perceive the world differently and go through different experiences. And that's what makes this world so exciting. We're all unique, we're all different, we all have our own way to share our message and get the message out. And that's what you guys got to do. We got to work from the bottom up, be the best that we can be. And I'm really excited about my YouTube channel. My God, there are so many great people pursuing this mission, realizing how important it is and that there is no other solution. There is no other solution. It isn't raw till 4. It isn't the starch solution. But that happens. With the starch solution, no telling, well, there is actually, but I won't go there. The point I want to bring, though, is when you see people like that promote, oh, we'll just do raw till 4 and we'll add 1 cooked meal, that's nothing new. That's what the Hallelujah Acres people were doing. They just gave it a name and already had a following and said, hey, I know people will go for this. Tell people what they want to hear. Shame on you guys. Shame on you. You know people are going to go for that. Yeah. It's just like Oprah said one time, it's every alcoholic's dream to find some way to still have it. We all want to keep having our drug of choice, don't we? Well, what is that drug of choice? It's cooking our food. If you're cooking your food, you've gone back to it, you're under a spell. Whatever deceives men seems to produce a magical enchantment. Only one way to really break that magical enchantment and make it easy on ourselves, that's with a solid food vacation. So go down below, listen to the Dr. Rober interview, really motivating. Watch the Deborah Duncan show, very, very, very motivating. And then go to my seminar and do it. Very, very motivating because it's a treat.